Sometimes you gotta close the door to open a window.
There is something oddly satisfying about Yuji pushing Sukuna to the point where he felt he needed to pop a domain expansion and even use his open technique. I mean, this is the same Sukuna who just a handful of chapters ago called Yuji utterly boring and keeps asking why you're even here in the fight. Anyway, Jujutsu Kaisen 258 is here, and I know I say this all of the time, but it really is a juicy chapter. I genuinely felt nostalgic. I felt like I was reading the good Lord and Savior's Hunter x Hunter right here. I felt like it was a genuine chapter, or I was reading the Argos catalog. There was a lot of text within this chapter, but the chapter opens up explaining how after Gojo had hit 2 black flashes, he was able to establish a unique reverse curse technique in his awakened state. And I love how in this world of Jujutsu Kaisen, black flashes are kind of like catnip, but for sorcerers, they all just go crazy for that shit. It's actually kind of wild. Anyway, the narration continues to explain even further here how what set this relay apart here was operation and burden of the technique being dispersed throughout separate regions of his brain. Now, I'm going to keep it honest. I'm going to keep it a stack with you. I don't know what any of that means right here, but my best guess is simply because he is Gojo fucking Satoru. He is able to just simply do this thing. Jinkies, my fucking glasses are dirty. Fuck. That made it fucking worse. Fuck it, we'll do it live. Anyway, now I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. I don't know what any of this fucking means. And similarly, Sukuna could have also done the same thing apparently. However, Yuji puts stops to that motion. Yuji landing 7 black flashes that struck in between the boundary of Sukuna and Megami's soul. And that onslaught trampled any notion of Sukuna and his hopes of recovering his RCT back. And again, like I said, who could have genuinely imagined that big bad Sukuna, big bad forearm Sukuna, who thought Yuji was ultimately talentless and boring, would be pressured and pushed so far to use his domain expansion against him, as well as using the black box. The times are changing. I genuinely can't help but think of that one Paul Rudd meme where he's on Hot Ones and he's like, look at us, who would have thought? Anyway, we get this quick shot of Miguel and LaRue here, looking sorry for himself, and LaRue's like, I can see heaven, it's close, you know, he's on death's door. And we see this ominous aura in the background here, and it is none other than Sukuna's domain expansion being used, and it looks menacing. And in my previous video with the leaks here, I mentioned how I've seen multiple translations here about this domain, and I wanted to wait for the officials from TCB about it. Well, nothing here in this translation even remotely mentions about Megami, which I'm genuinely happy about, to be honest with you. However, visually, it is a different story. You see, within this domain, you can see it is a fusion of Sukuna's and what looks to be Megami's 10 Shadows technique. Right here, it looks like you can see Pierce and Ox, or maybe even Nue. You can almost see like multiple eyes here. It kind of reminds me of Madoka Dia. You can also see hands here that kind of remind me of Agito, and you even see a slight rib cage around the sides, and that seems to be a spine in the background here flowing back. And you also see black lightning flowing around it, and the narrator does say how, carried on the sparks of black lightning, Sukuna's domain returns to the king. But honestly, again, the text makes zero mention of Megami, but visually, I would be lying to you personally if I said it didn't look similar to the other Shikigami that Megami has. So there is a various amount of binding vows here, and a couple of them get explained, but we'll get into that. The narrator continues to explain how by altering the hand signs and utilizing a part of the brain not affected by Unlimited Void, Sukuna employed his curse technique alongside his barrier. Amidst a maelstrom of uncertainties and impromptu binding vows, Sukuna's rush of black flashes allowed his malevolent shrine to burst forth once more with no loss in output or range. And we're shown Sukuna's domain absolutely ripping through Shinjuku here with incredible force, almost as if Gege kind of recreated the Shibuya incident with this one. And again, this goes back to my video on my theory here that Jujutsu Kaisen is basically just one big cycle here. If you haven't already seen that video, I suggest you go check it out. It is here. I will leave it in one of the cards at the end of the video, and I'll leave it in the pinned comment if you want to go check that out. But again, Sukuna is once again using binding vows to improve his techniques, but the trade-offs it's always interesting. This dude is so proficient with buying of vows and their trade-offs. It's actually insane. Both him and Kenjaku. And again, it goes back to my theory of I wonder if Kenjaku had a hand in teaching a lot of what Sukuna's learned here. But it's now time for a flashback, and we see the gang here discussing that the team who fights Sukuna here, they need to have RCT and a countermeasure for a domain expansion. And we get a little bit more information here on reverse curse technique. And personally, while I do like this information, it's very cool. I'll leave it up on the screen here, so if you want to pause, you can read it. But I don't find it that particularly relevant to the current chapter, if I'm honest. However, something interesting that Shogun did say here was that RCT varies case by case and can depend on the user as well as the one being healed. There's a lot of variables that go into it, kind of like a real life operation. There's lots of variables in a real life operation, and it's kind of the same thing. And I kind of like that JJK always kind of has this fusion of like science and history here. It's kind of nice. But this could also explain why Angel's arm may not have been healed entirely here. And I know that there is Gojo Coppers and haters out there looking for his revival and his downfall even further down the hole. But looking into this, I will get into that in a little bit here in a second, because there is some nuggets of information here that are worth going over. However, Choso explains how Yuji's RCT and his own will be different due to their bodies, and this is basically due to Choso being a Curse Rune Death Painting and Yuji having absorbed the other Curse Rune Death Paintings, and they can convert energy into blood, and it makes their RCT not as expensive as everyone else's, which explains why Yuji has healed 4 fatal wounds right now without running out of cursed energy, which again is insane. I was talking about this the other day. However, this is where the most interesting piece of information drops within this chapter, in my opinion, and that information is the reveal that we can actually switch souls between bodies. And now, I will say, I'll be honest, while I'm always excited to see information surrounding the soul within Jujutsu Kaisen, as you guys know, it is my favorite topic, we all of a sudden pulled in this, it makes me feel a bit strange. Souls and the understanding of them have always been something that the top tiers within Jujutsu Kaisen, the world, can somewhat understand. So we now somewhat being able to swap them is certainly an interesting choice to me from JJK. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I will wait for it to play out, but I did mention how in the spoilers video, I hate using the word. I really do detest the word, because it could be information that I've overlooked here, but it feels a little bit ass-pully. As much as I really fucking hate using that word, there are a small, and I mean a minute amount of examples within Jujutsu Kaisen, in my opinion, that cannot be explained through proper reason. And this is kind of one of them. I'm not really a big fan of it for we just all of a sudden do this, but I'm willing to look past this here, because this is the part that I'm the most interested on. So Wee says here how he mentions he can swap the context of the box without anyone knowing the box has been tampered with, and this is kind of a metaphor for the box being the body and the present being inside, which is where I'm the most interested in here, because he says if no one could tell that someone's soul has been swapped, does that also include Sukuna? I mean, what I'm getting at here is there is an unfinished plotline within Jujutsu Kaisen right now, and that is the cursed corpses. Something that Masamichi died for and Panda has knowledge on, something Gojo was aware of, and something Gaku Ganji now also has knowledge of that the higher-ups don't know because Gaku Ganji didn't tell them. And it's a plotline that JJK has yet to kind of tie up a little bit here, because there is a few loose ends here with Panda listening in on that conversation. And right now, we have a few people who may be in need of a new body. Higuruma, Yuta, Gojo, and more than likely Megami Fushiguro. So I'm just saying, do not be surprised if Sukuna's RCT comes back and he starts gaining more and more power, and these guys rock up to the battlefield in cursed corpse bodies that are like special grade, kind of like fucking Mechamaru. I'm not entirely sure. We saw Horikoshi do something similar with All Might, and his suit of armor. He brought back an incredibly powerful person who was emaciated, again armor, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, moving on away from this, this little plot line here, again, one of the reasons I'm almost okay with Wee being able to do this is because if I think I could look past Wee being able to swap souls, because if that did wrap up this said plot line in this way and could be a way of them returning Megami or other players in the field here, I'd be okay with it. This could open the door for a lot of people's returns. Nobara also. Anyway, moving on. This flashback wraps up with it being revealed that Kusakabe used Yuji's body for training to simply teach him how to use a simple domain, which is revealed to us as Yuji is standing inside of Sukuna's domain holding his own, and I can't help but think it reminds me, it's very reminiscent of Gojo. I mentioned this in the leaks video, but Yuji has twice now used moments within this series, within this fight, that are very reminiscent of Gojo. Him wrapping his legs around Sukuna and hitting him with the Peterson blood, and now him standing inside Sukuna's domain and just walking through it with the fucking simple domain active. And I've got to say, Sukuna's domain reminds me a whole lot of Pain's jutsu from Naruto here. The artwork is just, it's simply phenomenal for this chapter. This is genuinely a really fucking good chapter, I can't lie. But Yuji notices here how this domain, the eyes on it are bleeding, and mentions how it's incomplete, so there's got to be an opening. He just has to endure this. And the narrator kicks in, and this confirms Yuji's theory, mentioning how maintaining the highest degree of difficulty, even at this 11th hour, Sukuna sends slashes flying throughout his barrier on a scale as large as Shibuya. And I also want to point out to you how I wasn't sure from the leaks, but Sukuna is outright using the same hand sign that Gojo is. This brother is really just yoinking everything from everyone. He's yoink, I'll take that, yoink, I'll take this. However, the narrator mentions how by enveloping his domain in an outer shelled barrier, the bind and vow brought about by allowing an escape route has disappeared. And this is in reference to Sukuna's domain in Shibuya, where it was explained that Sukuna used a bind and vow for an escape route within his domain, and in exchange for the power, his domain, basically the power could be increased. However, with no escape route, Sukuna's domain has now a narrowed range, and its operation had changed, and that operation meant within the materialized landscape, the sure hit effect would activate. Now, I could be wrong here, but this feels like Sukuna somewhat infused the world slash, or at least certain parts of it, or like maybe certain things that he's learned from the world slash into the domain. And what I mean by that is this domain currently can hit Maki, which is something otherwise impossible as stated by the narrator. Which, as we all know, we always thought, oh, Maki will be able to get through his domain, but cleaving the mantle targets buildings, but now this thing is just targeting anything within the materialized landscape. It's the weirding as well, that like, that materialized landscape, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, let me know what you think in the comments down below there, but it feels like this is definitely an evolved domain from Sukuna here. However, because this domain is such a high level, Sukuna in his current state would only be able to maintain this for 99 seconds. This chapter, once again, feels very, very reminiscent of chapter 235 to me, with Gojo saying how, like, in, you know, so many minutes, so many seconds, whatever, Hollow Pip will rip through Shinjuku. That's kind of what this reminds me of. In just 99 seconds, Malevolent Shrine would collapse, and we are shown this awesome double spread of everyone just bracing for impact and trying to push through the domain as Sukuna, the Calamity, just tears through the landscape. And there is an important player that has appeared on this battlefield here, once again proving that Maki needed a little bit of help within this domain, because she can actually be hit by this thing, and that was Miwa. Miwa the Useless has arrived on the battlefield and is using a simple domain to guard Maki, which is kind of insane, kind of unexpected, to be honest with you. I wasn't really expecting Miwa to pick up here, considering she can't really use a sword ever again. Maybe she'll rock up with a bow staff or something. I'm not sure. I don't know. However, Yuji's simple domain actually breaks here, and it results in him taking a fair amount of slashes, but because Yuji is on his Timothy fucking Jenkins arc, he just tanks the slashes, but he does end up losing a leg. Yet, Yuji is simply just built different, and he used the same thing Choso did against Kenjaku in order to pull that leg back together again, which is a beautiful little callback. It's something that I love about Gege here, is that he always explains stuff as it's going along, but stuff that he doesn't explain, he'll always call back to it, and he layers his story in nice little pieces of subtext and hints and callbacks that if you're not paying attention to it, you wouldn't miss. It's kind of like that Leo DiCaprio meme where he's like, you know, that one. I honestly, with all these callbacks and Yuji using blood manipulation like this, I used to think at one point Yuji using blood manipulation, it would suck. But honestly, the way he's been using it within this fight, throughout the fight, has been something fucking special. The Pearson blood, him spitting blood into the schooner, was very brutal, was very dogfighty. Very, very much on par for Yuji, to be honest with you. This whole fight, I think, has been something special. And yet, nevertheless, that special feeling has come crashing down almost instantly as Sukuna uses his black box technique, which we now have an official name for: Fairness Open. And it's interesting to me how Sukuna showed parallels to some sort of chef throughout the series here. When he fought against Gojo, he mentioned how Gojo was just another fish on the cutting board, and he's going to strip away his scales first, in reference to Infinity, I'm assuming here. Then in Shibuya, Sukuna's shrine was shown to us with what looks to be chef's knives. That's what it looks like to me anyway. They don't look like regular knives, they look like chopping knives. And on top of all of this, his conversation with Kashimo about how he talks about what he eats, what he wants, and then also the revelation last chapter where he ate someone in the fucking womb. I wonder if this is why Sukuna likes Urumi, because Urumi is like a chef for Sukuna, but with ice instead. I'm not sure. I feel like the more we get from Sukuna's character, the more mystery and the more layers are added to his character overall. And it's interesting to me how his entire story, his entire livelihood, and everything has been so clearly defined by just fights and his curse technique. We've been able to infer so much from Sukuna as a result of fights and his curse technique. Been a seriously interesting chapter, and again, unfortunately, we are on a break next week, so Gege has left us left like crack addicts fiending for another piece of peak fiction. However, I won't leave you, and that is why you should like and subscribe. But anyway, that is everything from me. If you haven't already, go drink some water, go tell someone you fucking love them, and as always, I will catch you guys all in the next one. Much fucking love, big fucking kisses, peace.